To this day.
I'll come in your backyard, baby, for that, my man. I'm pound for pound the baddest man throwing down.
To this day.
I'm a true champion. I'm willing to go to his turf in Atlantic City. I'm going to step on it.
Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick.
I am the greatest.
Another one in close succession about our boy Eddie Hearn. It's kind of about Eddie Hearn, but it's about something that he said recently in the last maybe 12 hours about Tyson Fury. Now, he's talking about Tyson Fury potentially being elevated to the franchise champion, the WBC franchise champion. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation about that. I mean, it's a bit much to explain, but I'm going to try and narrow it down a little bit so that everybody understands exactly what the franchise championship is when it comes to the WBC belt. Now, all the alphabet titles have their main belt, the regular belt, the international, the intercontinental, all of these belts in between, all of these different sanctioning bodies. Now, the WBC in particular, they had the WBC belt, which was the full belt, the champion. Then you've got the interim, the diamond belt, the Mayan belt. Then you've got all the belts that they create to commemorate special events and for special fights. Canelo's got loads of different versions of his WBC title, and the ones that are given to the fighters below the champion, the interim, the number one contender, all of this kind of stuff. I think it was maybe in the last 2 years they decided to add another belt, the franchise belt. This was not a belt that you would fight for. This was a belt that was specially designated to certain fighters which the WBC deemed to be elite. Now, you already have to be a WBC world champion. And what the WBC do is they sit down, they have a meeting, they discuss their opinion about a certain fighter and whether they can be considered elite. Everybody votes. And if the votes are for them elevating this fighter in particular, then that fighter is offered to become the franchise champion. If they accept, then hey, they get all the perks of that, which I'll tell you in a minute, and they can also choose to decline it. The WBC base this on the fighter's accomplishments while being the WBC champion, and if they are considered to have a worldwide attraction in boxing, then to be elevated to the franchise champion, it has to be agreed between the WBC, the champion themselves, and their promoter. And it's kind of gonna work like the promoter requests for their fighter to be elevated at the fighter's request, or maybe the promoter decides, hey, I want my fighter to be elevated to franchise champion. The WBC vote, then they come back with their yes or no answer, and if it's a yes, then that means that the promoter and the fighter have to pay a sanctioning fee, which I suspect is probably going to be pretty hefty. And depending on what kind of sanctioning fee you're going to offer them, that could maybe sway the yes or no in either direction, because we all kind of raise our eyebrow at some of the WBC's practices, and this is just another one to add to that, if I'm honest. So once elevated to franchise champion in the WBC, you no longer have any mandatory obligations, and the WBC rankings no longer apply to you. Yeah. So what Eddie Hearn was talking about was what Tyson Fury could potentially do next. Now, if Tyson Fury did turn around and say, hey, I'm done, here's your belt, I retire, he rides off into the sunset and he's off, he's gone. I don't think he's going to do that. He might just turn around and decide, I'm going to become franchise champion. And if he becomes franchise champion, that means he will no longer have to face Dillian Whyte. And potentially, maybe Dillian Whyte will be elevated to the WBC champion. Now, if Tyson Fury was to decide to become the franchise champion, he would then be free to go and fight whoever he pleases next, being either Alexander Usyk or Anthony Joshua, the winner of that. He could just decide to do that and go on and fight for the other 4 belts. Now, the only thing is that if he did decide to do that and he went on to beat either Usyk or Anthony Joshua and got his hands on the rest of those belts, he wouldn't be considered undisputed, because if I understand it correctly, he wouldn't be undisputed until he came back and defeated Dillian Whyte. So with that being said, I think that this whole franchise champion thing has some pros and some cons. The ones that jump out most to me, it kind of depends on who the fighter is and what kind of situation they're in. Because look, if you think they gave Canelo the franchise belt, the WBC franchise belt, and for a fighter like Canelo, if you think about it, that probably suits him down to a T, because he's got this long line of people who he's gonna look to fight. He's got all of this top-notch opposition. He can fight anybody, and he is definitely an elite. I mean, you can't get more elite than Canelo, and for him to have that kind of freedom, like, you can understand. But on the downside of it, you've got situations like Dillian Whyte. So all of these guys who are working their backsides off trying to move up in the rankings in the WBC, I mean, what about these guys? What happens to them when they've worked all of this way? Imagine Dillian Whyte's done all of this work, and then Tyson Fury just goes blip, I'm going to be franchise champion. Now the WBC, in my opinion, they're a bit suspect, man. Some of the things that they're doing on multiple occasions, you have to question some of their practices, let alone what they've been doing with Dillian Whyte. But another example of the whole franchise champion designation was when they gave it to Lomachenko. So Lomachenko was designated, then he was defeated by Teofimo Lopez. Now, a lot of people think that Teofimo Lopez is the undisputed champion, and he should be, but he actually isn't. When Lomachenko was elevated to franchise champion, they awarded Devin Haney the WBC world champion. So at this moment in time, Devin Haney is the WBC champion. And I think, now I'm not 100% sure, Vasyl Lomachenko still has some kind of special designation. Now I'm not 100% sure about the ins and outs of how this thing works. I mean, it is bloody confusing, and I've kind of tried to explain it the best way I understand it, but I don't know everything about it at this time. But it's just all a bit confusing, you know? And I can see why the WBC would want to do something like that, because it does potentially give them the ability to put on the best fights possible. There would be no mandatories getting in the way. I mean, look at Canelo when he fought Yildirim. Yeah, he wanted to do that fight. It was his mandatory challenger, but the fight he could have had in between that could have been a much better fight with a better opposition if he was able to bypass Yildirim. But of course, Canelo only took the franchise championship belt at middleweight. He didn't take it at super middleweight. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Tyson Fury's going to do that, because I think he's going to push on and finish off his career and really cement that legendary status. He could fight Dillian Whyte, either Usyk or Anthony Joshua is around the corner potentially. And if he fights and beats all of them, nobody is going to be able to deny this guy. I mean, he's already well on his way to being an all-time great. So I don't know, unless all of this don't sit right with him, because then he just won't give a damn. It was like, forget that. This is what I want to do. What you guys are setting up for me don't sit right with me. But that is Tyson Fury. Guys, I'm hoping that I've given you a video that you're going to be interested in watching. I did want to keep it under 5 minutes, but it was a lot to cram in there. So yeah, guys, I will catch you on the next video. Thank you so much for tuning back into the Boxing Objective. I will chat to you in a bit. Peace.